When I started this project to make an adventure documentary shot on a mobile phone using Dolby Vision HDR, I had some big questions when it came to shooting on a mobile phone. Well, of course I did, really, because I'd come from a world of using larger professional cameras. So how on earth am I to use a mobile phone when it comes to being my main tool to capture a story? So here on YouTube, in a series of short films, I'm going to explore how you can make your own documentary film literally by using a mobile phone and capturing a story right from the palm of your hand. So I hope you will like this film. If so, give it a like, give it a share, and give it a subscribe. Let's get cracking. I think before we get started into the nitty-gritty of shooting on a mobile phone, I just want to spend a very short amount of time just kind of recapping the challenge that I'm actually going to do. So literally in like 10 days time, I'm going to leave to Iceland, and I'm going to meet up with an old friend of mine called Rob Small. And Rob, bless him, was in a catastrophic house fire. He spent like nearly 250 days in hospital while doctors battled to save his life and rebuild his body. And yet with all that behind him, he and I are going to go and do a really amazing but tough challenge. We're going to cycle approximately 1,500 kilometers around Iceland's ring road, going clockwise, starting in the capital of Reykjavik and then spending approximately 20-25 days on the road on gravel bikes, just experiencing this amazing country called Iceland. It's going to be really challenging, but in the midst of all that pure adventure, I'm going to try and raise the standards and shoot a really beautiful, cinematic, but story-driven adventure documentary. So that is the challenge. What am I going to use to record all of that? Well, I've got 4 phones at my disposal. 4. I've got 2 iPhone 12 Pro Maxes and 2 iPhone 12 Minis. They are the tools that I'm going to use to make this film with. Now, I think it's kind of worth mentioning, although I'm going to be using Dolby Vision HDR, not all phones are equipped with that. But nonetheless, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about is about shooting on a mobile phone in general. So don't worry if you don't have the latest iPhone. It's all about being creative at the end of the day, and perhaps at one point you can get your hands on some Dolby Vision hardware. But until that moment, let's look at some of the challenges that I have encountered when preparing to make an entire documentary film on a phone. So let's start. Really, the head scratching kind of started the moment I unpacked the phones from their boxes. I mean, one of the fundamental questions I had right from day one, pretty much, is how on earth am I going to power 4 mobile phones for over 20-25 days in a remote location? This is going to be a real challenge. I mean, come on, we all know that give or take, at the end of the day, before you go to bed, you have to plug these things into the wall. Well, that's fantastic when you're at home, but we're going to be wild camping most of the journey. So we're not going to have access to electricity, every day of the trip. How are we going to do this? Well, okay, fundamentally, we can carry some power banks, okay? There's no prize for working that one out. But we're on bikes, there's a limit to the amount of stuff that we can physically carry. Power banks are heavy. So I thought, how can I top these power banks up? There are dynamos that you can install into your bike, but the problem with dynamos is that they increase drag. They're going to take more power to pedal, and this is going to be a challenge that's hard enough as it is. So dynamos were pretty much quickly ruled out, and I was thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to save power? How am I going to top these power banks up, top these phones up? Solar was a consideration, but Iceland isn't really fundamentally known for its warm tropical climate. And although I am going to take a solar panel, I'm really not going to rely on it. So I was still back to square one. How am I going to conserve power? How am I going to keep these phones topped up. And I really started to think about how I'm going to do this. The first thing that really came to mind was, well, if you put the phone in low power mode, that saves juice. I think it turns off a lot of the background's activity on the phone, and that will save power. The other thing that I immediately then thought of was flicking it into airplane mode, and that will turn off a lot of the cellular activity of the phone, and that will save power. And then it was like, ooh, this eureka moment came into my mind. I was approaching this completely from the wrong side of the coin, because when you use any camera, whether it be an action camera, an SLR, or a larger shoulder camera, or whatever it might be, doesn't matter. What do you do when you finish the shot? You turn the camera off, don't you? There is no way you're going to leave the camera on and then go wondering why your battery's dead an hour later. You're going to need hundreds of batteries at this rate. But with mobile phones, when you get an email or WhatsApp, whatever, you then completely power down the phone. But that was the obvious solution. Remember, I'm using the phone purely as a camera. I'm not going to be using it for any other activity during this project. So the fundamental thing I learned was that in between each shot, I'm going to power it down. Yes, that takes a second to do. And yes, it takes a couple of seconds for the phone to reboot. But at the end of the day, it means that the battery will last potentially for days until that phone is turned on again. That is the first and biggest lesson I learned when making a film on a mobile phone. To save power, physically shut the thing down. It works. So after I had this first eureka moment about saving power, the next big fundamental question I had was memory. Memory. We all know that obviously phones have a finite amount of memory contained within them. It's not possible to physically replace the SD or micro SD as you would on an SLR or action camera. What you get on the phone is what you get. There is no more space until you file extract. And I'm going to come back to file extraction actually in my next video. But I wanted to basically save as much space on the device from day one. And I think it's worth mentioning that across all of the 4 phones that I have, none of them are equipped with a SIM card. I'm not going to be using the phone for any other function than to record our adventure in Iceland. And that is crucial. It's crucial because it meant that I no longer needed almost any of the apps that the phone came with. And I must admit, it was a very, very odd experience physically deleting apps like phone. Who deletes the phone app from their phone? Deleting email, obviously not installing any kind of social media or WhatsApp, deleting calendar, deleting clock, all these fundamental apps that phones come with. Delete. Now, ultimately, that did 2 things for me. It obviously saved me valuable space, and it also made my interface a lot quicker and easier to use. I mean, at the moment, fundamentally, I've got 2 apps installed on the phone. Obviously, I've got settings and things like that, but 2 third-party apps. One of them is a DJI app for the OM4 gimbal that I'm going to be using, and the other app is Filmic Pro, and I'm going to come back to Filmic Pro again in some other videos, because Filmic Pro is a game changer as far as making a professional documentary film. But this was the first step that I took on my road to learning to shoot on a mobile phone, and that is make your phone become a hybrid. Okay, remove all the fluffy padding that you do not need, that your phone is purely a camera. Change that mindset and the rest starts to become easier and easier. Now, I just want to pass on to you one little magic bullet of knowledge, and it was passed down to me when I was 16 years old, and I was fortunate enough to have a BBC cameraman as my mentor. And he said to me, Kevin, whenever you use your camera, you must always use your mental TV. And fundamentally, what a mental TV is the ability to see your film grow inside your head, to be able to think about the shot you just filmed and the shot that you will then next need. Now remember, whenever you're filming anything, there will always be a better quote, there will always be a better view to be had. But ultimately, you cannot film everything that moves. You'll end up needing terabytes and terabytes of data just to capture all of this thing. So mental TV is a way of planning your sequence, planning your content, planning your shot in your head. Now, of course, when you use your mental TV, it will also mean that you have a vision for your edit later on and that you don't have to plow through hours and hours of content. Now, another way to look at a mental TV is a thing called shooting ratio. And shooting ratio means for every minute that you have a finished film, you have another value of minutes at the end. Another, how many minutes you haven't used, okay? My shooting ratio is about 1 to 5. So again, for 1 minute finished film, I've got 5 minutes in the can. And I think that's quite low relatively, especially for a documentary. And I think one reason why my shooting ratio is not too bad is because I actually had this as my first camera. It's a 8mm camera by a company called Comet, and my mum bought it for me in a store in the UK called Dixon's, and this was my first ever camera that I learnt to use my craft on. And of course it uses film, and with film you can't overshoot. You have to plan, use your mental TV and plan your sequence. So this is a fundamental approach if you want to save power and you want to save memory and data capacity within your device. Plan and think, don't overshoot, use that mental TV, and you'll find that you'll be able to stretch the capacity both from a power and a memory point of view in your device significantly. And certainly in Iceland, I'm really going to be using my mental TV, even making notes on a piece of paper, planning what I've got, planning what I need, keeping that shooting ratio down. And that is one fundamental piece of knowledge that I really want to pass on to you. Like I said, it was passed on to me, now I want to pass it on to you. Use your mental TV, plan your shots, plan your sequences. Now, I hope this has been useful, but there's one other little piece of information that I'd like to pass on, and I hope the neighbours' chickens don't start up again because they've been clucking through most of this video. But there's one little thing that I want to pass on, and it was one thing that was annoying me from day one when using these mobile phones, these 4 mobile phones at my disposal, and it was driving me absolutely crazy. When I played back the footage, to be honest, I was disappointed with the quality. There's no other way to describe it. It just looked fuzzy, soft, out of focus, blurry, whatever words you want to use. It just didn't look good. And I was going crazy. I was looking on YouTube for solutions. I was going on forums for solutions. And then I suddenly realized how I could fix this annoying fuzzy picture. I'll show you. You know what it was that fixed it? A lens cloth. That was it. That was one fundamental piece of kit, or this is rather one fundamental piece of kit that I strongly recommend you always have with you. And also I've got a little airbrush, a little puffer. Why? Because the problem with using a mobile phone is handling. I mean, as cameramen or camerawomen, whatever, we never ever touch the lens. I mean, that is the holy grail. You don't put your greasy fingerprints all over your nice prime lens. But on a mobile phone, it's almost unavoidable, especially with this front camera that I'm using at the moment. You know, you get your greasy paw print, that's what you're going to see, a load of grease. Doesn't matter how good the camera is, doesn't matter what it's being recorded on in the back of the phone. You've got a dirty lens, going to look rubbish. So always give it a little clean, like so, and you're going to get a beautiful picture. So anyway, that's the end of my first little video on how to shoot content on a mobile phone. Like I say, it doesn't matter what phone you have, most of the principles are the same. And in the next video, I'm going to look at file extraction and start to delve into the world of Filmic Pro, because Filmic Pro is a game changer if you want to shoot cinematically. So I hope you've liked this film. If you have liked it, then please give it a like, share it around, share the love, and really important for me, please, 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 please subscribe to my channel. And till next time, watch this space.